Hey everyone, this is Brennan Patrick and Hayden Dale recording a deck tech for Arsenal Pass. Today we have a classic constructed deck and a fan favorite in Prism. So Hayden, you've been playing a lot of this deck. Tell me a little bit about the results you've seen and your experience so far.
Yeah, 100%. Been playing a reasonable amount. I wouldn't say a lot of Prism, but Prism was something I think the playstyle of the deck I wasn't immediately drawn to. It was actually Brendan who had hard claimed that he would play this deck. It was going to be his main, and since he's decided to renege on that, I decided I should probably take it up and play some Prism. You'll notice as well, Brendan, looking very dapper there. I see you've came prepared to do this interview today about the deck tech, so looking good.
6 a.m.
Yep. Looking good. So, yeah, playing a bit of Prism. I guess results-wise so far, mostly been playing this in armory events and in a bit of testing. Probably what I found, for the most part, main observation is that the Luminaris plan has been probably the biggest part of the deck that I've tended to play, and probably been the part that's been the strongest. So what we've got here in front of me is I've got the main deck is basically, you'll see just on the left-hand side here is the main deck. That's 49 cards, I think, in the main deck here, and that's really built around more of a Luminaris sort of engine, where we're playing, a bulk of our cards in the yellows here. We've got just the 19 blues main deck, and then the 9 reds, and then the rest filled out by yellows, which are really all the heralds basically in yellow, I think, apart from Herald of Ravagers, and then you've got the Celestial Cataclysm, and then we've got the Soul Shield, and those say this is the core that stays in every matchup basically here, Brendan.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, like we kind of I led with that question, you have been playing it though, right? You have been playing these armies. How has it performed for you, especially in? I mean, this is a pretty Bravo dominated meta, so I assume you have a lot of hard matchups there. We also have a lot of chain, and I think that if you are gonna kind of innovate and bring a new build to the meta, one of the top things that your on your list needs to can I beat chain? So how are you performing in the current meta?
Yeah, so I'd say Bravo and Chain have been two of the most prominent decks. Actually, Prism as well. Played a lot of mirrors so far through these armories, and a little bit of Katsu as well. I think so. We can talk about matchups and a bit of I guess, how I'm generally playing those matchups in sideboarding as we get through into the deck tech. But just as a sort of a top level, I found Guardian to probably be the toughest matchup. I have played a couple of Brutes actually, which has been quite difficult, especially if they're rolling hot on scab skins and you can't really set up an Auras plan. Or I played against a Levia that was playing Lead the Charges in their deck, which made that quite difficult to sort of outplay those action points. Chain, I was surprised. When I was on the other side of the table playing a lot of Chain into Prism, it felt honestly like it was close to a buy for the Chain player. The more I've played with this Prism deck and probably tweaked some of the cards, and we'll get to some of the, I guess, a bit of the spice we've got on the sideboard here, specifically for those kind of matchups. It's felt a little bit closer, and it feels like you can really output these massive turns if your deck is set up really consistently in the right way. So might go through exactly what the deck sort of looks like, because it does take a bit of a semi-transformational sort of look depending on which matchup you're going to, whether it's those more control matchups or the aggro matchups. Maybe we can just start by talking through some of the choices in the core of the deck, Brendan.
So actually, I want to stay as high level as possible.
All right.
Why don't you lead off with talking to me about the ratios of your deck?
Sure. Yeah. So we've got, as I said, in the main deck, we've got 9 reds, 21 yellows, 19 blues. Want the yellows to be the biggest part of the deck, and actually what you see is that it becomes about 50% of the deck, with a lot of the sideboard options over here being yellow cards. Outside of these snatches and these prismatic shields that we've got in the library, and the extra 2 blues for our Iris plan, which we'll get to, the rest of the options that come in are yellows. So we generally get to about half the deck being yellows on our Luminaris plan, about that. So definitely trying to keep that so that we're trying to draw 2 yellows in each hand. There's an argument, I think, to play more like 32, 34 if you can get to it. Probably what I'm struggling with is trying to play a Luminaris build and then move through into an Iris build as my, for different matchups, and still have the right number of blues in that matchup. So we can get into that with, I guess, the sideboard options, but there's definitely a case to be made that maybe you want to even see more blues. But that's the reason I'm playing just these 9 reds in the core of the deck. I'm not playing like Phantasmaclasm or any other kind of Command and Conquer, obviously really popular as well. I'm not playing that card, so sticking away from a lot of the other reds that people have tended to play.
Mm-hmm. And just to clarify, so we talked about that line kind of going in between the Herald Tenacity, Arclight Sentinel. So
Yeah.
that the on the left side, that's going to be your core deck,
Yeah.
correct?
So looking at the core right here, which is 49 cards.
49.
Yeah, 49 cards in the main deck here.
So what is the main game plan of the core deck, and what is your deck trying to do every single time it hits the board?
Yeah, so the core is really focused around Luminaris as a weapon, where basically we want to try and play 2 heralds a turn in that matchup. That's what the core of the deck likes to do. There's every card in here apart from our 3 soul shield is an attack action in the core, so it's heavily dominated by attack actions. 46 in the main. Post board with these snatches, we can be up to 49 attack actions in the deck. So we're never short of drawing non-attack actions that give us awkward hands that we can't attack into. This core of this deck wants to get on the front foot. The only reason we have basically the Soul Shield, which kind of feels a bit counterintuitive to that, is because it's a really strong defensive card that also feeds your soul, and is a bit of a flex card where you play it in a more aggressive deck, and when you transition to a bit more of a sort of aura-focused control-ish deck, because it does a great job in both decks.
Mm-hmm. And I see that we have both the Luminaris and the Iris of Reality here, so obviously we have some very interesting sideboard options. Before we go into sideboard, I want to quickly talk about just some standout cards here.
Mm-hmm.
So starting off here, like I said, Iris of Reality. You have a traditional Luminaris build. When are you playing Iris, and why are you playing it?
Yeah, great question. I'll answer that question, and then what I might do as well is I might just run through, I guess, some of the cards that have really overperformed for me in the main deck, or how some of these cards have been playing out. The Iris playing definitely more into those decks where they can break your Phantasm. So Guardian, Brute, that's where the Iris playing comes in, where you focus on these 9 auras coming in, and less so on the double herald attack. Yeah, that's basically where that's being played.
Mm-hmm. So, and then, like you said, standouts in the main board here.
Yeah, so probably the main one for me has been the 9 War Tune Herald. So the 3 red, 3 yellow, 3 blue. War Tune, because of the 1 cost, has just been so important on those key turns where you're trying to push 2 attacks, or when you go into the aggressive side of the deck where you're playing Tome of Divinity as well. 1 cost attacks, they're at a real premium in the deck because all the other heralds cost 2. So War Tune does this really important job of allowing you to play 2 heralds off off a yellow, pitch a yellow for something, get the Vestige ability, or in other matchups as well, you have the ability to have Tunic in the control matchup, pitch a blue, come in, if they block it, you can pay for the footsteps and then come in with the last, the War Tune Herald with your Tunic ability. So yeah, the War Tunes seem to do a really good job here. Herald of Protection is probably the best Herald, to be honest, in this deck, especially when you're in the aggressive matchup. Just the return on the hit effect is so important, whether that be red, yellow, blue. Red, really impactful because of the 7, that breakpoint of 7 attack. The Herald of Triumphs also do a really good job as well. You can often lead with Herald of Triumph and be pretty confident that a lot of decks are not going to be able to break the Phantasm ability, because they're probably going to be things like Command and Conquer or Soul Reaping, or other 6 attacks rather than 7 or 8 attacks. So that can be really important as well. I think one card that has been probably a little bit less exciting is the Celestial Cataclysm, but they are really important in the mirror as a way to break Phantasm. And you do often want to draw 1 on big turns to end games, whether that be in the aggressive matchup or that even be in the control matchup, when you start to maybe be able to get cards into Soul with something like a Merciful Retribution, for instance.
Absolutely. And I know you talked about multiple strategies here. You have the Aura strategy and the Herald strategy. So can you break that down a bit more? I know this goes hand in hand with kind of sideboarding and what cards you bring in for certain matchups, but we have 2 very distinct playstyles. Yeah. We have a Luminaris playstyle and an Iris playstyle. So why don't you just kind of break that down for us?
Yeah, 100%. I might just quickly touch on the one I didn't talk about, sorry, is Herald of Erudition. Obviously the Majestic, very important card for especially those aggressive matchups like Chain or Katsu, where you're trying to race them. The on-hit effect is so impactful, and that's actually why you see that we play some cards that help us augment that to get over key breakpoints with equipment plus defensive cards. So I might just start with the aggressive side, which is really, filling out this core for the Luminaris. So the Luminaris, more aggressive matchup where we want to be actually more aggressive than the aggro deck. So you're playing the 49 cards. typically what's coming in is this package down the bottom here, which is the 2 Phantasmifiers, the 2 Plunder Runs, and the 3 red snatches. Then it's going to get you up to, 756. We typically play 1 blue and, the tomes as well. The tomes and then either a blue, or if we're trying to keep our yellow count high and Arclight Sentinels relevant in that matchup, like into Chain, then we'll play the Arclight Sentinels, and sometimes we might cut a Soul Shield because we're trying to be aggressive. We don't actually want this card in the matchup. All it's doing is being a yellow for us to pitch, so we're quite happy to have other yellows that do a better job. And then depending on whether we're playing the Arclight Sentinels as well, will be whether we play one of the extra blues or we'll just stick to the 19 blues, or whether we go up to 20. So a few sort of options there to augment the plan. But yeah, basically this package here comes in, and what it really allows us to do is become quite a potent sort of 5-card hand deck where we can really get on a bit of a snowball effect with this deck, especially with cards like Tome of Divinity. So 5-card hand, one of the play patterns I really like to do is get a Tome into Arsenal, find a turn where their damage output is sort of middling, can afford to take the hit, come back with a 5-card hand. Red Herald is really difficult for them to block. But with a 5-card hand, even if they're able to do that, often we can then come in with a second Herald and still be able to play Tome afterwards if we have 2 blues in hand. So a blue plus a yellow, rather. Yeah, that's the main sort of, I guess, big turn plays. And the Phantasmifiers and Plunder Runs just allow us to get our Heralds over those breakpoints and present, good effects. So Plunder Run, for instance, if we are on a go wide turn where we're trying to play multiple Heralds, that's obviously going to give +2 to the first Herald out of Arsenal, but then it's also going to give us the ability that even if they block out that first Herald, our second Herald is threatening to come in with that card draw, which allows us just to keep going. Draw another Herald off the top, like a War Tune or something, and just keep maybe potentially play 3 Heralds in the turn, or set up a Tome turn. The Snatch is probably the most interesting card, I guess, in that area where a lot of people are opting to play probably would be Command & Conquer in this slot because it is a really sort of a flex card. It's a 6 attack for the mirror. It's something that threatens 5-card hands that a Guardian player might be putting together, for instance, and it doesn't get broken as a Phantasm card. What I've kind of found is that you really need something that is a 0 cost that has a relevant on-hit effect and targets those breakpoints. So obviously 4 being a really key damage breakpoint. That means in a matchup like a Chain or a Katsu, if you're able to maybe 3-card hand, come in for a Herald, and then into Snatch to threaten that card draw to get yourself back up to 5 cards, or on a bigger hand where you're coming with multiple Heralds, finish off with that Snatch for 4. It's really difficult for them to block out. You're probably getting the card draw, and basically any card in this deck, in that sideboard plan, you're okay to Arsenal. So the Arsenal is actually really, really valuable. Even if it's a blue Herald, it's still a Herald that's going to come through and present an on-hit effect, which is super relevant. There's also a really cool kind of interaction with Phantasmify and Snatch, where the Phantasmify turns the Snatch into an Illusionist card, which is going to allow Luminaris to get the go again, which is quite a cool thing as well.
Yeah, very interesting. I also want to talk about no Phantasmicalism. I can see why you're not playing it in this deck, but that is a very popular choice by a lot of Illusionist players. So talk to me about why you've decided to omit that card.
Yeah, so I started with Phantasmicalism in this build, was sort of the way I was trying to target, I guess, as part of that Luminaris build into like the aggro decks like Chain and Katsu, Azalea, whatever it is, even in the mirror. And it felt like the effect was often reasonably relevant, but the problem is it's a 3-cost attack, which is really tough on your resources, because on those big turns where you want to go wide, your resources are really at a premium, especially if you're trying to do things like Tome. That's again why we play the Snatch. But also it doesn't actually have an on-hit effect, which is super relevant for triggering, Vestige, for instance, getting a card into your soul so that you can then keep going with the Vestige train, pitching another light card to get that extra resource. So often what a Phantasmicalism basically does is forces you to probably block out with 2 cards and then just come in with a Phantasmicalism for 9, which is not very exciting. Because, in order to get the go again off of Luminaris, you need a yellow card, but Phantasmicalism costs 3. So just a really awkward cost, a really awkward sort of card in the deck. I just basically found that most of the time I was drawing it in these matchups where I wanted it. It actually wasn't doing what I needed it to do. So was much happier having a more streamlined deck with a few more yellow Heralds and these sideboard options, which help augment what's already a really strong core rather than trying to add cards that probably don't gel together as well, like a Phantasmaclasm.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then so moving over to the Aura plan, the Iris of Virality plan. Let's walk through that from kind of a top level standpoint. Give us a bit of strategy, but also tell us, what kind of cards are coming in and why and what matchups.
Yep. So in the Iris Reality plan, our core still stays the same. Basically, what's coming in here, as you can see, we've got the 9 auras here. We've got the Arclight Sentinels, the Genesises, and the Missile Retributions. Those are the first 9 that are coming in. So basically, the plan for us into the, I guess, more control decks like a Guardian or decks that can break Phantasm like Brute is to get one of these auras down, preferably something like back-to-back auras, and use our Iris to pressure the opponent. A Genesis at the end of turn with a 5-card hand is a good way for us to play Genesis, draw up, have a threat to come in with, and because of having that 5-card hand, we can probably also come in with something else as well. That's the reason we also play Tunic in this matchup rather than the Vestige, is that Tunic allows us to play the auras or the Genesis and the Missile Retribution of 1 blue card. So very, very resource efficient there by playing the Tunic. We also bring in the extra 2 blues to help our resource count there, so we get up to 21 blues. To be honest, 21 blues I think is the absolute minimum if you're trying to play the Iris build. 22, 23 might be more optimal. I'm struggling to, I guess, find space for those extra blues and what they would look like. And the Iris plan hasn't been isn't as exciting or as strong as I probably thought it might have been. So I have just opted for now. I'm only playing it into Guardian and Brute. The rest of the matchups I'm playing just this aggressive Luminaris build. Other 2 cards we've got here, we've got 2 red Prismatic Shield as well. So that just helps us only comes in as part of this plan and basically allows us to often set that card in Arsenal, again, playing it with a 5-card hand, doing something like tanking a turn or maybe blocking out with 1 card, playing it, coming in for 8 on our turn, if we can. Yep, coming in for 8. So Prismatic Shield is okay. I'm not super excited about it. That's the reason we're only playing 2 rather than 3. They can clog up your hands. They don't block. They do pitch for red, so they can be really awkward when you're trying to do other things like play these auras. But it is a card that can, create those 3 soul shields, which is super impactful. Forces your opponent to try and clear it. And if you have those 3 plus an aura already out on the field, it's really difficult for your opponent to effectively break up your attack plan. Prismatic Shield, I find, often helps you turn corners in games. You get an aura down, your opponent's having to try and pressure your life total, or they have to actually actively come in and hit that aura on your turn. You get to Prismatic Shield and then come in for a big attack on your turn because of the reasonable blue count, the plus Tunic to help that as well.
Yeah, so I kind of want to dig into some of these cards on this Iris plan because they are a bit interesting. I know we talked about some standout cards with the core of the deck, and obviously you touched on it with the aggro stuff. So Arclight Sentinel, what is the best use case for that? Because it is very resource taxing. It is sort of the blow out the chain, as a lot of people say. I mean, how do you feel about that card? Does it ever feel kind of dead to you? Is it clunky? How does that work out for you?
Oh, it's definitely clunky. It's a 6-cost card that does, on the surface, does one thing. I think the trap with Arclight is, and a most common play I see people make with it, which I think is the real trap, is to go, okay, last Soul Shackle trigger on the chain, I'm going to play Arclight in response, effectively blanking the chain player's turn, and they're probably going to take Blood Debt. But if you're spinning your whole hand to do that, all you've done is time walked and, basically, effectively bought yourself a turn. And while that's happening, they might have taken a bit of damage. But their damage probably isn't that relevant, and they've just stacked up their second hand, their banished zone full of some good cards. So unless that Arclight Sentinel is actually killing them, is stopping them from being able to play out enough Blood Debt cards to not take lethal damage, which you need to be well on the front foot in the first place for that to even happen, that's really underwhelming. What Arclight Sentinel does a lot better, and especially in the more controlling matchups, is actually to have that 5-card hand, play the Arclight Sentinel out. Maybe you already have an aura out as well. Come in on your turn, actually attack with the Arclight Sentinel for 4. Maybe also get in with a Herald if possible, or actually try and... Herald's probably a bit of a weaker plan, actually building up your board a bit more. get in the attack, and then on your opponent's turn, they're forced to come in at the Arclight Sentinel. You're now back with a 4 or preferably 5 card hand, but probably going to be 4 because you're coming in and actually attacking. You get to then continue to keep making your plays. It could be something like play a Prismatic Shield, come in for 8 on your turn, or come in for 4 plus set up another 5 card hand. So what the Arclight Sentinel is more doing is helping you swing tempo a bit. It is a 6 cost, and its impact is, you've really got to time the impact correctly, because you can actually be set back by playing an Arclight Sentinel. It can actually be actively bad for you. So you can hurt your game plan with Arclight Sentinel. I think you've got to play it very smart. I often have sat Arclight Sentinel in Arsenal for like 2 or 3 turns, just waiting to find the right turn, where I actually get to keep a 5 card hand to utilize it sort of more offensively and then swing tempo from there.
Yep, and talking about clunky cards that are actively bad for you, I see a nice library of Solana sitting
I knew you were going to
so...
say that. Yeah. So we do have a library. So this card is so awful if you draw it late. It doesn't pitch, it doesn't defend. But if you draw this card early, you get it down early against a Guardian player, it's probably going to win you the game, to be honest. That's been my sort of findings so far. You know, you're seeing Guardians play a few more yellows, like they're playing 3 yellow disable. Maybe they're playing like a yellow chokeslam the other day. They might be trying to play a few more yellows to not just die to this card. But getting 5 cards every turn is such a massive, card advantage engine that the Guardian player, even with all their crush abilities, things like that, you can just block out. You can play multiple auras in a turn. You can attack with, you can make a shield on their turn, make a shield on your turn, attack for 8. Like, you just have these, and also block. You have these massive swings. And because with the 9 auras that are yellows here in the sideboard, you're up 35, 36 yellows anyway. So it's not that difficult to be doing that every turn, especially if you're setting up your deck before you draw the library. Because obviously once you draw the library, you'll be drawing 5 card hands. You're going to go through your deck faster. If you've pitched to help set up that second run through your deck, library's just going to do such a great job for you.
So before we delve into sideboard plans, is there any other key cards you'd like to point out?
Probably just want to come back to Merciful Retribution a little bit and just how important that card is for not just the effect of the 1 damage. So that is really important in a lot of matchups. I think it's less so in the Iris build. I know in Luminaris builds, Merciful Retribution tends to do a bit more because there'll be more soul shields. People are a bit more aggressive. They're playing Prismatic Shield. This might get in like 4 or 5 damage, and that is still relevant in the Iris builds. But what's also relevant is that other text on Merciful Retribution, which says that, if a light card would be, whenever an aura attack action card you control is destroyed, deal 1 arcane damage. But then the next part, if it's a non-token light card, put that into your Hero Soul. It's a way to help you fill your soul, which is often quite difficult into decks that are not letting you hit with a Herald, that aren't letting you get those soul effects. So that's the other piece, I think, where Merciful Retribution is probably overlooked a little bit and is really a strength in this deck in particular.
Mm-hmm. And I think... sorry. If there's more key cards, please go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say, I think if we're going to talk about board plans, one thing that's obviously sitting out to me here is armor. So you do have the Fyendal's Tunic in the sideboard.
Yep.
But what is going to be your general kind of equipment layout here?
Yeah, so we'll check it out. Basically, the only extra piece of armor I'm playing at the moment is the Tunic. The rest is our core, which is going to be played into the main matchup, which is our Skullcap, our Vestige, our Phantasmal Footsteps, and the Dreamweavers. So Dreamweavers and Footsteps and Skullcap are being played into every matchup, and that Vestige of Soul is obviously alternating between the Tunic depending on what weapon we're playing, basically.
Okay, so I'm not going to let you get away with this one without talking to us about it, because we got Dreamweavers and Arcanite Skullcap and the main never being changed. So there's no consideration on Halo and no consideration on Goliath Gauntlet. So talk to me about that.
I like both of those, actually. I really like Halo. I wish I could find a spot for it. I think alternating between this Iris of Reality plan, it's really difficult to find just spots for luxury items like Halo. Halo I really like as a card when you're going second. I think it's a way to just guarantee that, especially on the Iris plan, you guarantee that you have a Soul Shield to start coming in with on your turn from Iris of Reality. But trying to find a spot for that is so difficult. When you're playing 9 auras, you can hope that you draw an aura on turn 1, so you can play it on turn 0, your opponent's turn 0. But yeah, it is a card that I like a lot. Goliath Gauntlets, I think, is also very good, but there's very few decks out there that are playing no 6 attacks. Probably Katsu would be maybe the only one, because even Chain has Soul Reaping, and probably Command and Conquer. At this point, I would expect them to still be playing Command and Conquer. Some builds might not be. I know we saw the Devastation build that didn't play it, but my experience so far is that people are mostly playing that card. Might be from the deck tech that we actually did with Command and Conquer, but I think that card is obviously very good. Also, just gives you the ability to guarantee your hero of erudition turns, which against those aggro decks is the most important. If they can break the erudition turns, that's probably enough of a tempo swing that they can win. But if you're, Phantasmify or Plunder Run into Herald of Erudition, which gets over their breakpoints of a lot of equipment, that's going to be massive. So really important. Often you're not doing it on the first. So into chain, you're often not doing it in the first time. You're just letting them husk it, for instance. But then you're coming in with Dreamweavers later on when it's that sort of critical point of the game. So yeah, Dreamweavers. The other piece we're not playing is we're not playing any Null Rune, which is probably maybe a little bit on the cheeky side. Not playing not playing a Null Rune Gloves. Have had Null Rune Gloves in there. Not playing against Chain. Would play it against Viscerai. Would play it against Wizard, I guess. But I think Wizard, you just, to be honest, play the Skullcap and the Dreamweavers and the Vestige setup, and you just go to town and.
Can't deal with 15 physical damage a turn.
Yeah, they can definitely win because they can just race you with arcane damage and you can't prevent it well. But I don't think Kano is very big in this meta because it just naturally dies to a Prism deck anyway that probably has one or two Null Runes. So yeah, I think it's okay for now.
All right, so I'm gonna go into matchups, and while we do that, let's go ahead and talk about the board plans for each one. So let's just hit off some of the top meta decks. So let's start with your hardest matchup. What I assume would be, obviously Brute might be the number one hardest matchup, but not something we see a lot in the meta because it does struggle with Shane. So the popular kind of ever-present Bravo. So what is your plan against Bravo? How are you beating that deck? It is kind of a theoretical counter. So talk to me about it.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to talk about just the Iris plan in general and whether this is 100% the correct plan to be playing. I've personally prefer the Iris plan to the Luminaris against good Bravo players. I think if a Bravo player is good, you run the Luminaris plan in with all your Heralds, all your attack actions. If they are just defending efficiently, pitching their deck for late game, they can actually just run you out of your good Heralds and then start to 1 or 2 card block you max. And then get through and set up their like back-to-back crippling turns. And because you only have Soul Shield and Skullcap, you actually can't block their strong crippling turns, or they'll just wait for you to draw an awkward hand. And because of time skippers as well, they can actually sort of have that get out of jail free card on the aura side. So I'm playing the Iris build into this, which is these 9 auras are coming in, the 2 blues, the 2 prismatic shield, and we're actually taking 1 card out from the core here. We're taking a Celestial Cataclysm out and just playing 61 card decks. We're just over there, which is fine into Guardian. I think they're able to potentially get you towards fatigue. We're playing for library in this matchup, to be honest. What the Iris allows us to do is just present a constant threat every turn. Instead of, we're on your Luminaris plane, you're trying to go wide and chip. Here you're just saying, okay, I'm going to have a 4 attack minimum at you every turn, plus possibly a Herald. And if you ever let me get 2 auras down on the field, I'm going to be in a commanding position and I'm going to not let you get back from that, because if they let you get the 2 auras on the field, then you can go off and start to do a bit more damage with your, you can create a Spectral Shield on their turn, create a Spectral Shield on your turn, come in for minimum 8, plus possibly an attack as well. So yeah, that's kind of your plan. You want to try and get like back-to-back auras, and this is something I've talked about with Dan Mackay, who's, we featured him in one of our podcasts. He sort of built the first Prism deck that came out sort of the first 2 weeks of the meta. He was talking about the Guardian matchup being, difficult, but one of the things that he really tries to do is get those back-to-back auras to put the pressure on. So find that sort of pivot turn where he can get one out probably end of turn to be back-to-back and put pressure on them. And I know he was more on the Luminaris build, whereas I've defaulted to this Iris build to go with that plan of just getting in and putting on pressure. And you're actually just sort of just chipping them down through the game, just running them out of some of their best cards, often forcing them to block with red attacks that maybe they wouldn't want to. And if you do, or if you do get to this library, then that's when you can really, really pivot the game. And you probably need a good Bravo player to recognize that and try and line their yellows up for that turn. Otherwise, it's going to be pretty devastating for them.
And I can't I have to talk about it because it is such a popular deck, but I don't think there's much to talk about if you're playing Prism. But that's going to be Katsu control. I assume you're on the Luminaris build, and it's got to be just a theoretical auto win for you.
Yeah, so I guess one thing that the Katsu control deck can do is they can just try and run you out of cards, basically. They can try and block you out and just come in with Kodachis. But if you know they're on the Katsu control, you can actually keep in auras, and that's really difficult for them to do anything about. Genesis is too much value for them. Merciful Retribution you can keep in, and you got to be really careful because you can keep them in. But if you just play them out willy-nilly, what they can do is they can just like Kodachi them, right? They just get the kill on it for pretty cheap. So you do have to utilize them wisely, but they are also yellows that pitch well in the early game. And yeah, basically you're just smacking them with heralds, trying to set up 5-card turns to punish them for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So on to what I perceive to be the boogeyman of the format, Chain. So what is your matchup like against Chain? And I assume that you're setting in this aggro plan and trying to go toe for toe.
Yeah, it's a race, to be honest. I'm trying to do the biggest 5-card hands that I can, which often is going to involve Tome of Divinity. This card has, been a standout for me, to be honest. This card's been a lot more powerful than I thought it would be. It allows you to have these really big 5-card hands. I'm not defending much in this matchup, to be honest. If I'm defending, I'm probably losing. It's probably because I'm on the back foot. So you really need to get off to a good start. You need to be presenting them with on-hit effects that are really difficult for them to block. So that's where obviously the 9 red heralds really come into play. Because early game, the Chain player is probably okay to block with 2 cards to prevent an on-hit effect until they get to 2 or 3 shackles. But the 7 breakpoint is really important. As is cards, of course, like Herald of Judgment. They have to respect that card, especially in the mid-game, sort of when they're 2 to 3, 4 shackles. So you have these ever-present threats, and they have to really manage their armor super efficiently. They can't actually afford to be throwing their armor at some of these red heralds or the lesser yellow heralds because of, or even to be honest, the Snatch, which is why this card's also important, because of Herald of Judgment, because of Herald of Erudition. If you get into the mid game and they've thrown away their husk to block a Herald of Judgment, and then you get to Phantasmify Herald of Erudition, you're going to swing that game massively. So you are playing for these spike turns, and Tome of Divinity helps you do that. You can easily be presenting like 24, 25 damage and matching the Chain deck for damage with Tome of Divinity. Have found that some Chain players are better than others at playing into this deck. They do recognize the kind of threat of a card like Tome, and they are sometimes in the early game blocking a bit more aggressively or trying to set up. They're trying to manage their 5-card hands a lot better. So if they recognize that maybe their damage probably isn't as high as what I could output, they're starting to block a bit more efficiently, which is maybe something we haven't seen. Traditionally, I think Chain players so far have just been like, my deck has the most damage, I'm going to throw it out. But this deck can actually deal more damage than Chain can, which is interesting.
Alrighty, so into the Prism Mirror.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. In the Chain matchup, yeah. So these are the cards down here that are coming in. The Phantasmify's Pun runs in Tomes.
For sure. So take us through the Prism Mirror here.
Yeah. Prism Mirror is an interesting matchup. It's just a slugfest, to be honest. It's not even. There's this whole, there's a thing where you can be playing like Command and Conquers, and I've seen some Prisms have like other red 6 attacks, or they'll have the Raging Onslaught yellow in their deck rather than Heralds. The problem with that card is that it takes up a yellow slot, and it's not a good attack. That card is a dead card in a lot of matchups, other than it pitches for yellow and blocks 3. It's like a kind of like, especially when you're trying to be aggressive, it's just like having a crack bauble in your deck. So I don't play that card. We're not on CNC because we're on this a lot more aggressive line of the Snatch. So you'd think we're probably a bit unfavored in the mirror because of that. But what I have found so far is that this core of the deck, and we do play the Luminaris plan, so we are bringing in these pot of cards here, plus 2 Arclight Sentinel, is that this core is a lot more efficient and a lot more consistent than what they can do. So yeah, they might break a Herald here or there, but you have footsteps. Like, breaking a Herald isn't actually the end of the world. They throw it, you footsteps it, you still get to come in with another one. And if you can actually keep on the front foot in that matchup, then you actually, I think the deck is a bit more consistent than most of the builds out there, which really helps you. And then you have this ability. Snatch is actually a fantastic card in this matchup as well, where you can block with 2 cards, come in with a Herald plus a Snatch, and it's like such a huge threat, and you're actually winning that turn cycle pretty efficiently.
Yeah, and kind of lastly, one of the cards I actually kind of forgot about here is that you're not playing Yellow Pummel, something with Herald Erudition is kind of yin and yang, peas and pie.
Yeah.
You know, the old one too. So what's the idea behind the choice to exclude the Yellow Pummel in this deck?
Yeah, great call. Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to round out this deck. Take us talk about some of the cards that I'm not playing. We've already talked about Phantasmaclasm, we've talked about Command and Conquer, we've talked about some of the equipment. The other cards I'm not playing that we've seen a bit more frequently are Springboard Somersault and Pummel. The reason for not playing Pummel, to be honest, is that it's just awkward. It's really easy to telegraph as like so Chain has been the one where people are playing it, you know, saying like it's the way to get across Husk, it's the way you get Herald of Erudition over the line. If you're playing into Guardian, they have defense reactions. If you're you know, and they can actually just play around Pummel. It's so easy to see. Chain, they can play around it, use their Husk efficiently, use their other 2 pieces of armor more efficiently, or in some cases, you know, they can just not even care about it. It cannot be relevant because it costs costs you 2 resources. That's one of your cards you're going to draw already gone right there and there just to get that damage over. Yeah, you take a card from the hand, but if Chain play around 4 shackles, are they going to care? Often not that much. So what I play instead is these Phantasmifiers and these Plunder runs, which the cost efficiency, so the cost to power ratio is so much, it's more efficient. It's 1 for 4 on the Phantasmifier, which gets past breakpoints. It's 0 on the Plunder run, which, you know, gets past breakpoints and allows you to actually present another threat that could draw a card. So really just focus on these 5-card hands rather than a Pummel that can be so awkward. If you draw it in the mid game, and you can't set up a good hand with it, you have to block with it or pitch it. Blocking with it blocks for 2. Yeah, these cards down here block for 2, but they cost 0. So they're always so much more efficient to play these hands out of. So yeah, that's the reason I'm not on Pummel. Just didn't find it to be very effective. Found it really easy for opponents to play around.
And no Springboard as well, I assume, because I mean Springboard was a weird card in the deck. Initially, I know Dan Mackay had said that it was his least favorite card, and somehow it kept finding its way into its deck. It does make sense, being the yellow line, and being in a very efficient defense reaction when landed in Arsenal. But that being said, talk to me a little bit about why it's not in this deck specifically.
It's just awkward. It's not that great, and there's no room for it. Basically, to sum it up, you can't really find room for it. The deck is really tight as is. We've already talked about some of these cards that are missing out, like the extra equipment. Yeah, so that's basically why it's not. There is one thing I think you could do with this deck if you wanted to take this a slightly different direction, which is you could basically cut the Iris plan. I think the Iris plan is pretty reasonable, and I think it's slightly better than the Luminaris plan so far in my experience into the Guardian. I'm not actually sure that all Prism players would agree with that, but I do think it comes down to play style a bit. And I think it's pretty reasonable into the Brutes because they can roll the Scab Skins, so rather than just trying to just ignore that, go wide, hit them hard, and they can, you know, get extra action points, or they can actually go wide, present you damage, kill your shields, and then hit your auras. Instead of doing that, you play this Iris, which I think is a bit better. But if you feel that's a little bit more marginal and you're way more concerned about just getting this Luminaris build correct, I think you can cut the Iris, you can cut the Prismatics, you can maybe even trim some of the auras. You can still play an aura plan with the Luminaris, and that's perfectly fine. It's just a different sort of more go wide build, and you can fit some of these cards in here that are currently omitted, like the Springboard Somersaults, maybe like the extra equipment, maybe some extra yellow heralds. I would still personally stay away from Phantasmaclasm and the Command and Conquer. I don't actually think it's where you want to be. I think the Command and Conquer is something that people auto-include because it's good in the mirror, blocks 3, has a relevant on-hit effect, but it costs 2. It's so hard to actually go these big turns with that card. So maybe you could play it in the sideboard, but I would probably still leave it.
Awesome. So with Road to Nationals less than a week away by the time this video gets uploaded,
yeah, wow,
is Prism a good meta choice?
Tough question. I think for certain metas, if you know your meta well, if you know that there's going to be a lot of Chain, a lot of Katsu, less so Guardian and Brute, I think this is a perfectly reasonable choice. Maybe there's some Azalea as well. These decks that can't, I guess, pop your Phantasms early, basically the decks that are going to struggle against the Luminaris plan, I think is a perfectly good reason to take Prism out. I think into this build in particular, I think is better than other builds I've seen against Chain, which I think is super important because I think Chain is going to show it in numbers in the next 2-3 weeks as we get into the early part of Road to Nationals. So yeah, I think if you chain, Katsu, Azalea maybe, then yeah, I would sleeve up and happily take Prism. I think it's fine.
Hmm. So, any final thoughts before we close out this deck tech?
Just that I think Luminaris and Tome of Divinity and these Phantasmifiers have been super impressive to me. There's a lot you can do with Prism. I think it's pretty narrow at the moment because obviously the Illusionist card pool is a little bit lighter, but the power of cards, I'll add Vestige of Soul into that conversation as well. The power of some of these cards is really high, and you can do some pretty silly things. So it's also a really fun deck to play, just to kind of whack people. It's not my traditional style I enjoy, but I've liked it a bit more than I thought I would.
Awesome. So that has been Hayden Dale's Prism Iris of Reality hybrid deck tech. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and shoot us a subscribe button. We have been absolutely soaring in subscribers, going from, I think it was last week, like 500, almost all the way up to 700 right now. So it means so much to us. Encourage us to keep putting out these deck techs, keep putting out this
100%.
gameplay. That being said, shoot us a comment. Let us know what you think of the deck. Is Prism something you would consider bringing to your road to nationals? Do you think it's currently well positioned in the meta? Also, we have kind of started a new series of doing these deck techs. Is there a certain hero you'd like to see next? Maybe Azalea. Hayden's a big Azalea fan himself. So let us know in the comments. We'll try to get that one up as well. But with that, Hayden, thanks so much for sharing the deck with us, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks all. See ya.